Those containers where we store money are called piggy banks. For water it's called bottle. To dump waste, dustbin. Similarly, in computer programming, those containers where we store numbers are called variables. And in computer, these containers are in the form of memory. And these variables can be of different data types depending upon their sizes. If we have a small data, like a value within -128 to +127, we will take a variable of char data type. And they are of size 1 byte. If we would have something bigger, like in the range of -32,768 to +32,767, then we would take a variable of int data type. And they have a size 2 byte. And if we have a data of floating point numbers or a numbers with decimal point in this range, then we would take a variable of float data type. And they are of size 4 byte. And in case of bigger decimal numbers, we would take a double data type variable. And they are of size 8 byte. We have seen that these are some common and basic data types. There are several data types available for storing data from various sizes. If there is a requirement to store small data, we can choose a variables of char data types. To store large numbers, we have int data types, whereas to store floating point numbers we can take float or double data type. We will explore more as we progress ahead in this video. Please note one thing here: the size of these data types depend upon the compiler, which we will check at the end of this video. Let's understand these data types one by one in detail. In char data type we can store a range of numbers -128 to +127. And the size of these data types is 1 byte. As we know that 1 byte is equivalent of 8 bits. And we can represent 1 byte like that. This is our 1 byte block, which consists of 8 individual bits. The first bit is called LSB, least significant bit, whereas the last bit is called MSB, most significant bit. Now this MSB represents the sign of a number. If it is 1, then our number would become negative. If it is 0, then the number would become positive. Now 1 out of 8 bits is being reserved for representing a sign. The remaining 7 bits can be used to store data. The number formed using 7 bits can be calculated by 2 raised to the power 7, which equals to 128. In other words, we can store numbers up to 128 using 7 bits. Since our numbers are started from 0, then we can store range of numbers from 0 to 127. Now if we assign MSB 0, then the range in positive side would become 0 to 127. Similarly, if we assign 1 to MSB, then this time range would start from -1, because there is no number exist like -0. And the range would go from -1 to -128 in the negative side. And this is how the range of char data type goes from -128 to 127. What happens if we use MSB to store data? Let's see. If we do like that, the range to store number would increase from 7 to 8 bit. Which means we can store number up to 2 raised to the power 8 equals 256. Now the range would become 0 to 255. But wait. To do all of this, here we need a modifier, which can modify the property of char, and this modifier is called unsigned. And by doing so, we can now use MSB to store data, and increase the range of char data type in the positive side. One thing to remember here is that, in case of unsigned char, we cannot store negative numbers. It only allows to increase the range of numbers in the positive side. Let's see what other numbers we can store in char data type. First, take a look for unsigned char. Numbers anywhere from 0 to 255. Like that. And we can't store negative numbers here. Can we store these characters also? Yes, of course. Let's understand. Our computer or microcontroller understand binary numbers, And there are some codes behind these characters, which we can represent in binary numbers. And these codes are called Ascii codes. And this is Ascii table. Here we can see the Ascii code corresponding to every character. Character A has a value 65, which we can easily store in Unsigned Char because it comes in the range of 0 to 255. Similarly, there is a code corresponding to B. At the rate, and every character that is on your keyboard, the decimal value of all these characters fall below 255. Therefore we can easily store in Unsigned Char. Character 0 has a value 48. Please note that the character 0 is different from integer 0. We will understand better at the end of this video when we look some good programming examples. If we talk about Sine Char, we can store negative as well as positive numbers within the range of -128 to 127. And we can store all these characters also. Because if you have noticed that the ASCII values of all the characters on your keyboard comes in the range of -128 to 127. Similarly, the size of int is 2 byte, which is equal to 16 bits, and we can represent it like that. MSB will represent the sign of the number. Now there are 15 bits remaining to store the number. And the number formed using 15 bits can be calculated by 2 raised to the power 15, which is equal to 32,768. By assigning MSB 0, the range to store number in positive side would be 0 to 32,767. Whereas by assigning MSB 1, it would be -1 to -32,768 in the negative side. And the total range would become -32,768 to 32,767. And for unsigned int, we can use MSB to store data. And we can use this range to store numbers. And please remember here, we cannot store negative numbers.